Welcome to the Health Fix podcast, where health junkies get their weekly fix of tips, tools, and techniques to have limitless energy, sharp minds, and fit physiques for life. Hey, health junkies. On this episode of the Health Fix podcast, we are going to be talking about microdosing psilocybins to see how that can help with your nervous system. And in particular, helping with overcoming chronic disease, chronic illness, chronic mood disorders, things of that nature. So I brought on Kayse Gehret. She's a microdosing expert. She shares her personal journey with microdosing and its profound effects on a seizure disorder. Pretty impressive. And of course, I share my personal story in here too. And I'm wondering if she might be able to help me with some microdosing. We'll get to that on another podcast. But we discuss on this one the healing potential of microdosing, the importance of community support. So you know what you're doing, you know what to get into, you know what to track, and how microdosing can help individuals navigate trauma and chronic health conditions. Now, Kayse's going to explain the nuances of finding the right dosage, the subtle changes, the energy and vibration changes that you want to be looking for, and the integration of microdosing with other healing modalities like acupuncture, EFT tapping, Reiki, things of that nature. So she gives some great advice in this podcast, especially for those who are beginners or even seasoned microdosers, to be able to really explore deeper what's going on when you're microdosing psilocybins and how you can really harness this potential to elevate your health. Now, for those of you who are a little skeptical, this is not talking about getting high. This is really about tapping into your nervous system to help it along the way to move past certain blocks, to rewire your brain, things of that nature. So I highly recommend looking into and exploring this alternative healing method with us today. So let's introduce you to Kayse Gehret. Kayse Gehret, welcome to the Health Fix podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness, we already hit on one of the biggest topics that surrounds my world. Is I've been known as the microdosing queen, but not for mushrooms, not for what someone would think. It's hormones microdoser. But hey, you know what? I believe in microdosing on many levels, whether it's supplements, things of that nature. But yeah, like you had asked me, I haven't had anybody on to talk about microdosing. And of course, I'm excited to talk about so many things. But first and foremost, I always like to start off with, how did you come to microdosing? What was the process of figuring out that there's something to this microdosing business out here?
Thanks for asking. I say it's part serendipity, part fate. And so very long story short, grew up wanting to be a doctor. I thought my whole childhood I would be a doctor. And instead at 19, I took a hard left, literally, and moved across the country to California, where I discovered alternative healing and went into Reiki and body work, spent many years in that. And I was interested. I heard about the spiritual, emotional healing qualities of psychedelics, but I was always fearful because I had a grand mal seizure disorder. That no matter how many modalities and medications I tried, just couldn't touch it. So at some point, I was introduced to, serendipitously, the idea of microdosing. And I was like, okay, this is subperceptual, subthreshold. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to greatly destabilize my mind. And I started and my seizures stopped. So I noticed after a few months, and I really had no expectations because at the time I didn't really know anybody who had done it. There had been one mention about microdosing in Dr. Jim Fadiman's book, but other than that, it really wasn't well known at the time. And after about a few months of practicing, I noticed my seizures had stopped. I had not had an aura, and I had received a whole lot of other healing gifts and benefits.
That's fascinating. And it's interesting that you mentioned you tried different things. I think a lot of people who come to this podcast in particular are looking for something that can help them, but maybe they might be afraid of big dosages. And especially in hormones, I've found that less is more. And vitamins, minerals, herbs, so many different things. And this is why mushrooms kind of fit into that category. Now, it's interesting, the grand mal seizures, because I would think that would have a lot of folks being really worried about trying many things, especially like marijuana, anything mind altering for sure.
My doctors were not for it. Put it that way. Yeah, I remember being very shocked by how extreme their reaction was actually back then. I mean, fast forward now, it's so funny. I have many, many doctors and nurses and clinicians in my program, my microdosing programs today. But back then it was very, very different. And it was so fear-based. It was so fear-based and it was so lacking in curiosity that it really surprised me. Like, nothing else has worked. Why not try this? And yeah, and it worked.
I definitely want to get into microdosing a little bit, but of course, I'm being a doc. I am a little curious about, health, why we end up with certain conditions. And, we have this idea of like, okay, I got this because maybe it was genetic, or I got this because maybe there was some exposure. But then there's also that look into the nervous system and wiring maybe during, your development, things of that nature. Did you dive into like, okay, this worked for me? So energetic imbalances, of course, working with Reiki. What did you discover in that department? Because I love to hear how folks have kind of looked back and went, how did this happen? Like, how did this evolve? Or maybe even just an idea of what you're thinking?
Great question. Yeah, in hindsight, it's very clear. It's very, very obvious and clear now in hindsight. But I think as a kid, I was a very sensitive kid, very empathic kid. And so I have a very open blueprint energetically. And two things happened. I lost my father when I was 7 years old. And I remember I started getting headaches. That was how my body was handling the grief. And so I got terrible, terrible headaches through my young childhood, and then my seizure started when I was a teen, and then I got Epstein-Barr, as a lot of kids do at 18, 19. I was a freshman in college, but mine rolled into a very serious health crisis. And I believe, in hindsight, I was not tested, but I believe I had meningitis. I was at college at the time. That was still back in the day before there were vaccines and precautions for that. And so that's what I think happened. And I think my nervous system was already highly sensitive, highly dysregulated. And then I had an illness that really targeted the nervous system. So I think that's why all the medications in the world and all the treatments in the world for epilepsy, that wasn't the root cause issue. It was nervous system healing that I needed.
I haven't talked about this before on the podcast, and I've really only started to share with my followers a little bit about my history. I have, I don't know how to describe it. It's not been diagnosed. And so, of course, I'm like, could microdosing be something to consider in this case? I have this odd thing that'll happen when I get pain, but not every time that I have a decent amount of pain, I will have a seizure. And also I've had it happen when I don't have a lot of pain. But if I look back, there's always been a time when I've been under more stress. I've been dehydrated, electrolytes were missing, things like that. So I look back through it. And so we never went down the pathway of medications because it wasn't such a frequent occurrence. However, it did impact me after graduating naturopathic school because the last one happened about probably 2 months before I graduated, and they took my driver's license from me. And I was like, what am I going to do? Right? Like how am I going to go from here? And so one of the things that I find very curious here is because I also, not Epstein-Barr, but I definitely ended up getting quite sick. No one knew what it was. I'm thinking maybe cytomegalovirus, some virus is my thought. And the reason I want to keep highlighting this is because I want folks to hear that connection, because so many people are coming to me saying, no one knows what's wrong with me. They can't figure it out. Nothing's working. And so it sets the stage for, maybe we try something outside of the box. So my fascination now is even more piqued from your story, because I'm going, could it be that maybe this could benefit me too? Because I've tried microdosing. I will be honest, I've tried microdosing myself once. Wasn't fully into all of the neurological stuff yet. Wasn't working on all the grounding. Yeah, I was doing acupuncture, I was doing that side of things. Let's dive into talking a little bit about your process and how you came to realize, okay, this microdosing thing actually helped my seizures. What happened? Did they get better progressively? Did they just stop completely?
They just stopped. Yeah. And it was, I think at the beginning, I didn't share this. Even after I started offering programs and supporting other people in practice, it was about a year in, and I remember sitting down with two friends and colleagues, and they were saying, why don't you ever share openly about microdosing healing your seizures? And I thought about it, and I was like, why am I not sharing it? And I think there was part of me that was still, I didn't want to overpromise or set an expectation because it was seemingly so miraculous and it happened so immediately. I didn't have to work for it.
Wow.
And I had to unpack a lot of like why I was withholding this. And so after I stopped and I openly shared it, my friends were like, you need to share this. You need to share this so other people can find this too. And so I've supported many, many, many people who come to me now are all kinds of nervous system dysregulation. Psilocybin in particular, of all the mushrooms, is so deeply healing for any kind of nervous system dysregulation.
It's, I think the dysregulation just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more of a problem. I mean, I just read an article the other day where autoimmune conditions are they're increasing by 19.1% every year. And I'm like, this is autoimmune. Autoimmune is definitely connected to the nervous system. I don't identify with lupus, but I have antibodies to it that will come up when I'm more stressed, and have happened since I was a teen when these seizures started happening. So it's super fascinating to kind of start looking at my own health and putting the pictures together, much like I do with my clients' pictures. I'm sure you've probably seen that connection too.
Absolutely. It's really interesting. A lot of times people will have things just clear, but other times people will have things reactivate in order to clear. They come up from the body. It's really interesting, and how mushrooms bring up, it's very much an energy work. We're both energy workers in various ways. And when I see people work with mushrooms, it kind of brings energy up and forth. And so people will have reactivations of Epstein-Barr or shingles or latent autoimmune to bring up and clear it. And oftentimes they have memories surface with that viral comeuppance. It's very interesting, where a memory of when they got the virus is kind of entangled and coded in the body and comes up for release at the same time. It's really fascinating.
Oh my gosh. I'm happy you mentioned that, because it is sometimes hard to explain to folks that you might get healing crises happening while your body's working through things, because a lot of times it'll be misinterpreted as, oh, this made me worse.
That's one of the toughest things with our Western conditioning, to be honest, is we are all so deeply, heavily conditioned to suppress symptoms. And we think that's healing. It's actual real healing is quite the opposite of that.
It's so funny. I mean, I could go on for hours, and our podcast is not going to be related to skin, but the putting the corticosteroids when your skin itches, or if you've got a rash, it's like, oh, wait a minute. These are messages from your body saying, yo, pay attention to me. And likely the seizures are messages. And that's kind of what I've come to think about, because at first when I was trying to explain this to my husband, I was like, I don't know when they're going to come. I don't know if they're going to come. And when he did finally see one, it was so out of the blue, But if I look back, I could see the clear connections. And I think for a lot of people looking at like, okay, I've got a rash, or I've got a reactivation of Epstein-Barr, all of these different things. If you're microdosing on your own, which is very common, because I'll have a lot of patients tell me that they decided they were just going to start microdosing, which is great, but it's like, let's talk through this. So let's talk through how you help support folks in your community who are microdosing. And you know what, I'm going to that, but I'm putting the cart before the horse. Let's maybe talk about what microdosing really means first. And then we'll talk about how you support folks, because I think that's the biggest kicker here, is having the support. Because a lot of times all of folks, like I said, tell me they're doing it and I want to help, but I'm not at a capacity to be able to, which is why you're teaching folks like me to do this. So let's talk about microdosing first, what that means, and how you vision it.
For sure. So microdosing in my little world is around mushrooms. So I began with mushrooms, particularly psilocybin mushrooms will always kind of be at the foundation of our community. But we also too support people in other mushroom microdosing, as well as some other plant medicine work, depending on what they need. As the world has shifted over the last 5 years, people have different needs, our systems have different needs. So it's nice to kind of have a whole apothecary of nature to draw upon. When we talk about microdosing, it's typically a psychedelic, or we also call it an entheogenic medicine. So it's kind of bringing forth the divine within, and people come to practice for spiritual reasons, personal growth, emotional regulation and resilience, mental health reasons, physical health conditions, nervous system regulations, stepping away from addictions and dependencies of all stripes. And microdosing is taking about 1/10 of what would be a journey dose. So whatever the substance might be, So you're not feeling trippy, you're not feeling stoned, you're not feeling outside of yourself in any way. In most cases, if you're in your sweet spot of dosing, you're actually more at home within yourself than you've been. You're kind of more dialed in, more focused, more articulate, more expressive, and more clear.
Makes sense. And I think, when we look at that sweet spot, I think that's what a lot of people are trying to figure out because, for lack of a better term, there's sometimes a mushroom guy around the corner, and they're getting their mushrooms in a capsule from the guy around the corner. And this is much what it was like in Tacoma at first when I was working with patients. I found a guy who actually really was growing well. He was solid in terms of what he was doing and understanding. But the point is that that's where a lot of people, come from. And the person's like, well, this is what I take. And so you follow that. How do you recommend for folks to kind of look at microdosing in terms of, do we do liquid extracts? Are we doing, teas? Are we doing, capsules? How do you help folks to kind of determine their sweet spot?
Great question, especially now. Like when I first started 5 years ago, the problem was there was no information.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's almost too much information. People go online and in the Reddit rooms and they're like, what? There's so much conflicting information.
Yeah.
And so there's so many different options and opportunities for sourcing now. It can be really overwhelming to people. So that in part was why we were inspired to create our community.
Mm-hmm.
So people could step in as pure beginners and feel comfortable. You didn't have to start right away. A place to where you could be with real people, real guides who are working with people who have a lot of experience to ask your questions and get them answered and get kind of real practical answer tailored to oneself. Most of the time with mushrooms, most people work with capsules, although there are tinctures, there are tablets, there's chocolates, there's gummies, there's lots of different formats. But capsules, I would say, are the most common. And the most common microdosing range is anywhere between, say, 25 milligrams up to 300 milligrams. Our community tends to fall start at 50 on the lower end, and then kind of some people are at 100 milligrams.
I'm glad you brought that up because for what I had learned, a lot of people are starting at 50 and that's the only option they had. They were given, 30 capsules at 50. Here you go. This is what I do. Have fun. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time I tried it was 50 milligrams. It was for an entire month. I felt nothing. I'm not 100% sure if I also, because I wasn't fully awake to the nervous system and I wasn't doing things like Intersize or Brain Tap or any, other things. So I don't know, and I haven't done it since because I was like, I don't know if it really worked for me. So now I'm hearing up to 300 milligrams. Okay. Maybe the microdosing needed to be a little bit more macro on my micro.
Usually if someone will start at 50, a lot of times we start at 25 or 50 just because I work with a lot of people who would never have imagined they're working with psychedelics. So they're 80s kids, or they're a little bit shy, or they're nervous about losing control. And so starting lower than they need to is very, very confidence building for them. So they'll dose at 50 for maybe a week or two and go, I'm not feeling a whole lot. Do you think I can move up? And they'll move up to 100 until we hit their sweet spot. But ideally, you'll start to feel cognitive benefits. Typically first, people just notice like, I'm really dialed in. I can think better. My memory's better. I'm more articulate. I'm very productive, effortlessly productive. People feel an uplift and calm typically, and oftentimes their dream life comes alive. Lots of people start dreaming amazing dreams, very symbolic dreams, and that's fun for people because a lot of times it's people who haven't dreamed in many years start dreaming again.
Wow. In Chinese medicine, we take that, lack of dreams as being quite a deficient state. And there's different variations on it, kidney blood deficiency, things of that nature. But the kidneys are most related to the adrenals and to, this concept of no dreams happening, which I find very parallel with folks having given up on their dreams too.
Yes.
Do you see that as well?
Yes. A lot of times it's very common on intake forms in the last couple of years. People say to me, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm having a good life. But when I look out at the next 40 years, it's not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to stay where I am now. I still don't really feel like I'm really fully living my life fully. And that's what's bringing them to practice.
That's really cool. That's really cool to look at it that way. And I think we're definitely awake now, where I would say 5-10 years ago, even in the naturopathic medicine space, we weren't looking at health this way. we were looking still pretty quite symptomatically. Yes, root cause, but still taking this concept of the symptoms and being like, could there be more to it? And now I've gotten to the point and some of us joke that we get so far in practice and the protocols aren't working, things aren't working. And then you're like, did I address the nervous system? No. And we have to go back to it. So one of the big questions I get from a lot of folks, because obviously a lot of folks want to work on their nervous system. They've had past trauma, they've had past things happen. They're worried about things kind of coming up, which is why I like, hearing about communities. I like hearing about you can have someone, you could travel, go to a ceremony, but you've got care before and after, those types of things. Now, in a microdosing situation, it sounds like it's not as likely, but have you seen where folks have had some things come up where now, we've got to figure out how to help them deal with it?
Beautiful, beautiful question. This is one of the things I love about microdosing so much is psilocybin is beautiful medicine at bringing things up that have been stored in the body. It's beautiful for long-term trauma that's lodged in the body that no amount of talk therapy, no amount of anything else can get to access. But a lot of people express that fear to me too. It's like, I know I have these things and I want to heal from them, but I don't have the bandwidth for it to completely destabilize my life. I have too much going on. And that's one of the things I love about microdosing. It brings things forth in a way that's in bite-sized pieces. So you're doing the healing real time through your dreams, through your relationships, through your emotions, through your day-to-day life. And it's much easier to integrate your healing than, say, if you do a psychedelic journey where it's a whole lot of truth all at once. And then you kind of have to put back the pieces together into place. It's a beautiful companion. I do have a lot of people who go on to journey and do the big medicine and get the big transformative, beautifully healing experience. But they're so much better served by preparing for that with microdosing to start to open up some of those threads and themes. The other beautiful thing I've seen the way mushrooms work with microdosing, with trauma healing, I've worked with a lot of people over the course of my career who had childhood abuse, childhood sexual abuse, childhood physical abuse. And so many of our narratives and our healing, they had all been to therapy for many years, had lots of counseling, lots of group work, lots of programs. But mushrooms work at an energetic level that goes beyond the words, beyond the mind even. It's an energetic healing that happens. And so for people who have experienced great trauma, it helps you, rather than focusing on your trauma, it helps you transcend and expand beyond that trauma. So rather than staying in the story of our trauma, like a lot of our healing modalities do, it kind of stretches and expands people's perspective over who they are. They're no longer a survivor or a victim. This doesn't define their life anymore. It's just part of their human experience, part of their human story. And they can move through life with a lightness that they didn't have before.
I think that's one of the biggest issues with our healthcare system and just how we've all been taught. I too am in this world and it's a hard dance, is problem focused, versus solution focused versus trying to just transcend all of it. And with trauma, it's tough, but also with things like autoimmune conditions, chronic illness, when you don't feel well, a lot of times you want to put your middle finger up at the doctor and be like, look, I really don't care that you're trying to tell me to work on my nervous system. Let's find the problem. Let's hone in on the problem. Do you find that microdosing can help, in chronic health conditions too, much like the trauma, get folks away from that paradigm of, I have to fix this issue? It's almost like weight loss. I have to get the weight off.
People are surprised by how all the things they were trying so hard to fix and work on before, they receive them, but they're receiving them instead of efforting for them. It is much more effortless. Like, I can't tell you how many people stop drinking alcohol. They don't even intend to. It just happens because mushrooms shift them energetically. Their vibration is completely different. So they're sleeping better. And when they're sleeping better, they're eating better. And when they're eating better, they're exercising more. And when they're exercising more, it's like this beautiful cascade effect that happens. And they're not thinking about it so much. It's just kind of happening, which is the dream. And then we have to decondition from the idea that it's okay for this to be this easy, right? It doesn't have to be so problematic, a problem to fix all the time. as is in our systems.
It seems like, I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, some people will be like, oh, it's too good to be true. But, I'm in the camp of you don't know till you try. And you kind of go from there. And I'll call myself out. Like I said, I tried the one time, I didn't do it again because life just, here we are, fast forward, boom. And I'm definitely curious about retrying the process now that I understand the system so much more. And, I think that's where your community comes into such a great need, is you can really educate folks on, like, if this doesn't work, try that, kind of the troubleshooting. That's the best thing, is the troubleshooting component. How big is your community right now? How many folks do you have?
Global community, we have about 400 people in that now. Yeah, from 30 countries.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. Are you guys doing any meetups? Are you going to do any in-person stuff ever? Just out of curiosity.
I just posed that question to them last week. Yeah, we're just starting to think about that. Yeah, we've been online since 2020.
Wow.
And so, yeah, a lot of people are feeling the call to be together in person again. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I saw you had a podcast on, and of course, guys, she has a podcast. It's, microdosing for healing. And of course, there's always a concern with nervous system and heart. And oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What do you find in terms of like a standard statement, maybe, or not standard, that doesn't sound like fun, like a broad statement that you can give to folks if they're worried about their medications, and maybe their doctor's not as quite open or even knowing of what kind of things could come up at all?
Yes, great question. This is one of the biggest misinformation pieces out there right now and all over the place. And so a lot of people think that they can't start microdosing until they get off all their other medications. And that's absolutely not the case. Absolutely not. So most of them are going to be fine. There are some medications that blunt the effect of psilocybin. So that's pretty much the issue, is working together with someone who can help you assess which medication you're on, your dosage, how long you've been on it, and how we adjust your microdose so that you can receive the benefits and effects of psilocybin to overcome the blunting effects of some of the medications. It's typically with antidepressants, and some sleeping medications are the biggest ones, but far and away, most medications are fine. And the podcast episode that you're mentioning, my friend and colleague Kristen Spear developed this really incredible tool at psychedelicinteraction.com, where it's just a user, in seconds you can type in your medications and it will cross-check it with psilocybin to give you a really detailed report of any contraindications with your specific meds.
That's huge. That's huge. Thank you to her for doing that. I'm glad you brought her on. And so, guys, you can check out that podcast over at Kayse's website, and we'll get all that in the podcast notes. Now, one of the things you mentioned, part of me kind of taking that little segue, is when folks are microdosing, they're changing their energetic vibe. They're changing their wiring. They're rewiring themselves, and I think for a lot of people that seems right, too good to be true. But at the same time, going to tie it into the meds, I have found for certain folks, they've rewired their vibe so much that they don't need the antidepressant. They don't need the sleep aid. They don't need the blood pressure med. They don't need all these different things. And I'm fascinated by it all the time. Let's talk a little bit more. And I would love your insights as a Reiki practitioner, but also as someone who works with microdosing and energetics. What kind of things do you see when someone's slowly starting to change their vibe? What can folks from the podcast notice that, it is working? It is happening.
This is a juicy one. Great question. So it's very, very subtle. And this is the magic is in the subtlety. And that's why it's so nice to have a guide, a coach, a community to reflect, because a lot of what can happen, we can miss it because it is so subtle when you're doing it on your own. When you shift your energetics, the world interacts with you differently. And we have noticed that the most sensitive beings in the world notice first. So you'll notice babies respond and react to you differently. Like you'll notice, like you'll be the one where a baby will just fixate on you. When you're in an airport, when they catch your eyes. Also, babies, children, animals. We have so many incredible stories of wild animals coming into proximity of a person and not having any fear, just hanging out. And wild stories, lots and lots of birds in particular. There's something very special when people start microdosing. We have lots of bird stories where birds land on people and hang out, or sit next to people and hang out, which makes sense because they're the messengers between the worlds. right? And have a strong mystical connection. Also, interestingly, children on the spectrum. So, children on the autism spectrum have incredible gifts of sensitivity that we're just beginning to understand and appreciate. And so we have noticed that when people are microdosing, children who are on the spectrum respond and to them differently. But a lot of times people will say, I didn't really notice much shifting in me, but my kids are telling me I'm different. My spouse is telling me I'm different. And I'm responding to things differently. Like sometimes it's so subtle, people like life has to happen and something has to happen. And they'll go, wow, I responded to that completely differently than I would have 3 months ago. So something's happening.
That's cool. I recently had an experience where there were two deer in the road and they stopped and the one came over to my car and I'm like, whoa. So I rolled the window down and got to pet its nose. And I was like, oh, this is
That's
impressive.
special. That's
Yeah.
special. Yeah.
So, these kind of experiences are super huge. And I definitely want folks to be paying attention and noticing these because, wow. Birds, I'm waiting for a bird to sit on my shoulder. That would be awesome. I love animals, so of course I'm gonna want that. So what other, I know you have the community. We talked about that. You do some coaching as well. I'm very curious, just because I have folks that listen that are also coaches, are fitness coaches, that are various coaches of other different types. So let's talk a little bit about the program you have for practitioners. And how they can kind of see, microdosing from a different level. What are you doing with us kind of folks?
Yeah, happy to. So the Facilitator training program came out of, we did 31 microdosing groups. We have a 6-week immersion program. And out of those groups, a lot of people started supporting other people in practice. They kind of went from 0, and 6 weeks later, they were like, I think I want to do this and support other people. It's profoundly healing for me, and I want to share it with people. And so it was just time to create a formalized program to bring the skill into people's lives. And so we do work with a lot of coaches and clinicians who are already in the healing arts in some capacity, who want to weave microdosing into their existing practices. So it's really ideal. You can microdose on your own. I did back in the day by necessity. You can microdose on your own, but when you're microdosing in the container of a health professional, a coach, someone supporting you, a guide who can kind of help you recognize the patterns and connect the dots and just hold space for you while you're moving through the process, it's infinitely more effective.
I can absolutely see that, especially when someone's working with their health already in one way or other. I mean, I give fitness coaches huge props because they're dealing with a lot, like their counselor and, multiple things. And so I look at it and I'm like, you really see that this would be a great place going forward for a lot of people. Now, with sourcing, this is something that a lot of people are always kind of asking me, how do we know? What do we look at? And I've noticed in Washington, there's a lot of communities now that are developing on sourcing. How do you recommend for folks to look at sourcing?
Beautiful question. It's really important. So I encourage people, first of all, to take your time with this. Like, don't go to the first option on Instagram where you don't know what you're getting. Your sourcing is everything. This medicine is a relationship. It's a being. I consider it's a living energy and spirit. And so you want to take your time and get sourcing from a person who holds it with integrity and reverence and truly cares for the work. That said, when we first started, we taught people how to grow their own because there wasn't a lot of sourcing options out there. And so I had a cultivation partner and we made kits for people so that at home, this was during the pandemic, people had a lot of time on their hands to learn new hobbies. And so that was really beautiful. So you can always grow your own at home, get your kit, order your spores online and grow your own, similar to kind of having your own herb garden and creating a relationship with the medicine. After the pandemic, people got busy and went back to lifing. Yeah. Said, I don't have time anymore. And thankfully, a lot of different cultivators and sources are now public. They have different protections. A lot of them have established churches and religious exemptions to be able to source people around the country. So that is what enabled our community to really grow globally, is we have medicine sources around the world that can source people in support. So we have a wonderful medicine source in Canada, another here in the United States, that people know that they can go to and get high quality, high integrity sourcing.
That's incredibly important these days. I mean, I just had someone last week get a supplement from Etsy, and I'm like, I don't know why she was buying it from Etsy, but okay. And it ended up being a knockoff. And, these kind of things are scary, and we hear about it with Amazon and whatnot, but this is a problem. And that's why I'm always, get to know your grower, get to know, at least a reputable place that is recommending a particular company.
Great advice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think another big thing that I'd love to ask you is looking into your personal experience over all the years, and looking with microdosing. If someone's listening to this right now and they're like, I don't know, I'm not really sure if this is for me. What kind of advice would you have for them to really kind of dive in, get some more information, go to your website, those kind of things? What kind of things would you tell someone who's kind of dabbling and wondering if this is going to be helpful for them?
Yeah, I mean, my community and platform is designed for that person, honestly, because that was me. I'm a very cautious, careful researcher type person. I take my time to dive into things. So I really built our platform for that person who is very cautious minded. And so there's lots of information and resources on our website that are all vetted. And we have a lot of podcast episodes to listen to. So people, if they're coming for a specific reason or condition, they can probably find an episode about that. And then our community was designed for that too, so that people could step into the community. It's just month to month, and it's really accessible. And people can come to step into those calls and ask questions, meet a bunch of practicing active guides around the world to get their questions answered. And also, it's deeply empowering just to listen to people from all over the world, some of whom have been practicing for 4 or 5 years now, and see what's possible. And that really builds your confidence fast.
That makes sense. And I'm guessing within the community too, you're kind of helping folks get ready for doing a microdosing round, I'm guessing. And in terms of microdosing too, I think the other big question I get quite a bit is, do I do 1 month and then I'm done? Or do I cycle? Like what's common in this?
I know. My guides who are in other parts of the world always laugh at us Americans. Like, we want everything done in 30 days. Like, can we be done in 30 days? They're like, what's going to happen in 30 days? You're working with lifetimes of healing, right? It's just us being us. But we do 6-week cycles in our community. So 6 weeks is typically long enough for people. Almost everybody is going to have some experience over 6 weeks. Some people are going to feel effects the very first day, and they're kind of off and running. Other people, it takes a little while to connect with the medicine. Sometimes they'll have emotion come up to move and energy shifting. And then before they kind of get in their flow with the medicine. And then other people are on different medications that blunt, and it might take a little bit longer to connect. But we typically do 6-week cycle. And I would say it's typical for people to dose consistently according to their protocol for about 3 months, and then taking a break of a few weeks.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot more than anyone's ever been able to tell me on it. So, obviously being Americans, it's like, I would imagine someone from Europe being like, it's done when it's done. You'll know when you'll know when you're done. And for American brain, that's like, well, I don't know, is that 3 months? Come on, 45 days? Like, I need the details.
Spot on. When are we there? When are we going to be there? Yeah.
Right, like a kid in the back of the car on a vacation. Are we there yet? But it's funny, that's how we are. And that's no fault of our own. We weren't taught this. And medicine's definitely rapidly changing. It's coming, we're getting there. Slowly but surely, we're getting there. But we still have that like, we want the magic pill and we want it now. And if the microdosing was a microdose and it was one, I mean, everybody would be on it, but that's not the process, right? Like you're saying, and those folks are saying, it's a lifetime of things we're undoing. And in a good way, we're rewiring from that. So one of the other big things that I was wanting to ask you about is, I love to hear stories, and I love to hear, like, we've heard yours. Can you think of some folks that it was just, whoa, it really spoke to you in terms of what happened when they microdosed? And give us, like, just a little, and even if it's broad and you see it often, I think just for folks can hear just a little bit more of when you are consistent with it, when you're doing the work, what kind of things can you expect? That would be one thing. And then the other would be if there's anything aside to, does acupuncture, have you seen it amplify results? I mean, I personally am a little biased on that. I'm going to say yes, but I want to hear what you see. Or like, does Reiki work with it? Does, tapping, EFT tapping, what kind of things can you pair with microdosing too? That's another big question I always get.
Let's start with the practice piece. All of the above. All of the above, absolutely. And that's one of the beautiful things of microdosing is a lot of times it's such a novel thing people are stepping into that it opens them up to doing other novel things that they might not have tried before. So we've had so many people get acupuncture for the first time, do Qigong for the first time, do Artist Way process for the first time. It's endless. And so once you tap into your intuition and your instinct again, people kind of get drawn to a certain lifestyle practice that they need. A lot of times people are like, do we have to journal? Well, some people will love to journal, but if you aren't drawn to journal, no. I mean, a lot of times microdosing is bringing us back into balance. So people get drawn to what they get drawn to. And it's often what they have been pushing down or neglecting, kind of tapping back. When people feel really stuck in the process of getting to that point, I'll often ask them, well, what were you into as a little kid? Like, what was that weird thing you used to do when you were a little kid that your family was like, whatever, okay. And a lot of time they'll go, oh gosh, I was always drumming. Like I was always drumming as a little kid. And so it's kind of tapping back into what our soul loves to do and kind of how our soul loves to move. So probably the thing I recommend the most over the course of the last 5 years would be somatic practices, acupuncture, Reiki, polarity, body work, massage therapy, because so much of this work is getting back into our body, getting back into our spirit, energy starts to move, and then it can be really, really helpful, especially for those people who have a lot surfacing, to kind of move the energy out and bring the energy back into balance. So yes, yes, yes to all the above.
Awesome. Good. We can choose our own adventure here and try things on. And that's really the biggest thing that I like to highlight here is that there is no one protocol. There is no one magic thing. We're all different and we got to try things on. And it sounds like, you've seen people try all kinds of different things and probably multiple things on in the course of this experience. And of course, we have to tell folks about your community and we have to give them some more details about you, where they can find you, where they can work with you, all of that.
Thanks. And there's nothing more empowering than hearing people's stories. So that's one of the most fun things about coming onto the community is people just come in and share. And I swear, like I've never done a call where I'm not just kind of in awe of what people share and what's possible. So if you're curious to hear people's lived experience, that's a great place to go. So we're at microdosingforhealing.com. That's where everything lives. And we have a global community that's very accessible, just month to month. We have immersion programs, we have a podcast, and then we have our professional facilitator training program. The next one will open up January 20th of 2026.
So folks can join the community, figure out like, okay, what are these resources that I can use to source, respectfully as well, on that side of things. And I know you're probably in agreement with that. And in your community, you will also let folks know if you guys decide that you're going to do a meetup of sorts.
Yes, indeed.
All right, Kayse, such good stuff here. Thank you so much for sharing your story and letting us know about the global microdosing community. I think this is incredibly helpful for folks. Plus, it's online, really easy, accessible, and you've got world attendees. So anyone everywhere can attend. One last question. You said you have your lives. When are they? When are you?
They are Sundays. We always have them on Sundays to make it easy for people's schedules, and we stagger them in different time zones. So we have a lot of people down under, and then we have bunch of people over in the eastern part of the world. So yeah, we stagger them, but we mostly have them on Sundays or weekday evenings.
So easy, guys, trying to remove all the barriers, of course, to getting the support that you need. But I think this is really important and just something that can help folks to feel good in their bodies. Because I know that this time in life, it's a little heavy in the world right now. And if we can all raise our vibes, we can overcome that. I bet you probably agree. I can see you nodding there. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, fellow health junkie, thanks for listening to the Health Fix podcast. If you enjoyed tuning in, please help support me to get the word out about the podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review, and just get that word out. Thanks again for listening. Hey, health junkies, want to let you know what I'm drinking while I'm on the podcast. Today, it is from Perfect Hydration, the perfect morning drink. It helps me to eliminate needing to do apple cider vinegar, a little lemon water, take my turmeric, take my electrolytes, and my B vitamins. Because now it's all in one drink. So if you're looking for something that can help you simplify your morning routine, this is it. And if you're old enough to remember the drink called Tang, that's what it tastes like, and much healthier, of course, in this case. So if you're interested in trying it out, you can head over to Perfect PRFCT. There we go. Perfect.com.